Appreciate you coming on.
No, thank you for having me. It's just a bit bonkers at the moment. But anyway, hello, where are you?
I'm out of Massachusetts.
So and so you get the weather.
I love the fall. I mean, I wouldn't trade it for anything. People love like Florida, LA, whatever. I mean, I get why people like it, but I'll take 40 degrees, 50 degrees, and I love it.
The thing about moving from Scotland to over here with the family was I've got one kid who is she adores the California. I would say sunshine. I mean, the wind at the moment is insane. We've got sunshine and winds, but the other one's just like, I miss the snow. I miss the rain.
Yeah. It's like you get when the 4 seasons, you get a taste of everything. I'm sure. Is Scotland like that? You get a taste of everything?
Scotland, we get one day of summer a year.
Yeah.
It's normally we call it DREDD. It's just raining the entire time. But
so Paul, you do mention Scotland, right? So I've had 3 other guests that are I would say certainly native to Scotland, and I just wanted to show you them really quick.
Who's that?
Katie Dickey, who is Game of Thrones. Jimmy V, who took over for R2D2.
No, I did not know that.
Yep. And this one here, and he was so kind. Absolute stud in Braveheart, Angus McFadden.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so Scotland is well represented. I wasn't trying to flex there. I was just trying to make the point that Scots make for some pretty damn good guests.
It depends what time you get them at, because if the regular ones are over in Scotland, if you're doing it kind of online, if they've had a few whiskeys in the evening, they're going to be shite to talk to you.
But you know what's, Paul? You know what's great? I don't know if it's a Scottish thing or what, but they all 3 had one thing in common. They were very honest, kind, and right to the point. Like there was no BS. There was no BS. There was no any of that. They were as kind as, I don't know if it's a Scottish thing or personality thing. But
it is an absolutely Scottish thing. I mean, I've still got my studio in Glasgow as well.
Nice. Nice.
But, I was talking to someone about this the other day. So whenever I'm working on UK projects and I fly back, then I've got my base there. So I grab a hard drive and I've got a duplicate of this studio here. Not quite a duplicate. I can't quite put the Yamaha Concert Grand under the arm. Right. But the thing about Scotland, genuinely, people just tell it like it is. So, I mean, for better or for worse, because it can also be. But there is a wonderful story of there's a band called Travis, UK band, and Fran Healy, the lead singer, and they were big. They played like 80,000 stadiums.
Yeah.
And 80,000 people in the stadium. And they'd be walking down a street called Sauchiehall Street. You couldn't SAUCHIEHALL. Right?
Yeah, I'd have no shot at that. Yeah, I'd have no shot
at it, right?
Yeah.
So he's walking down Sauchiehall Street, and he's like, he's finished his tour, and he's like, he's wearing his hat, he's feeling that, and the kind of what we call Neds in Glasgow, which are basically just like, I don't know, people that just not come from the streets, but just like quite cheeky, and they're all got, hey, big man.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, and he's like, oh god, they want my fucking autograph. Like, what's with the fucking hat? If there was ever a way to be brought down to earth, it's been back at home in Glasgow. So.
Yeah, how great is that honesty? So refreshing, so refreshing. So is it a good thing or a bad thing that your mom is a music teacher growing up? Like, is that a positive? Is that a negative? Is that a curse? Yeah. Is it a blessing?
The irony of all of this, right? So mum was brilliant. She taught me piano. She's a wonderful flautist, flute player. You call them over here. We call them
right
in Europe.
Gotcha.
So brilliant flute player and a good pianist, but her span isn't the same as mine. I can do sort of 12 notes on the piano. She can just about get an octave. So Mozart's not great for her.
Right.
But she was an absolutely brilliant teacher. And then she made us not made us, but we would play. I've got a brother and a sister, and we would play in front of other people. And my brother was an awful trumpet player, and my sister was an awful whatever. Yeah. And the poor people would have to come around and listen to us at Christmas going, oh, they're so talented. But what it did do, genuinely, she infused all this enthusiasm. I was always surrounded by music. It was all fantastic. Until I got to 18, and then I went up to the Conservatoire, the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama in Glasgow.
Right.
And of course, how the hell do you make a career out of music? I mean, you're not going to be a teacher. Right. And so she was very encouraging. She's like, come on, how's that going to be a job? And my dad was the one that was kind of like, that's your passion, go for it. I was like, I mean, it is my passion, but I don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
Yeah.
I went up, and they were both incredibly supportive. I went up because I was in London at the time, so went up for what I thought would be 3 years, and then just started hanging out with bands up in Glasgow. So I was studying film music at the Academy, the Conservatoire, but there were also bands like Belle and Sebastian and Mogwai and those kind of guys, and Simple Minds in Texas, and I just started sort of doing string arrangements for them, really. Which means, if they want strings on their album, then they go, hey, there's the classical dude, he'll do it. And then it kind of went off from there. So I would say having a mum that's a music teacher is probably a good thing.
Paul, what did Dad do? Just out of curiosity.
What does Dad do? He completely not musical. He's tone deaf, so he would stand next to me at church on Christmas Eve and go, "Once in Royal David." Oh, yeah. Please, brother, stand next to him. He organizes exhibitions and stuff like that.
Oh, nice.
So, absolutely nothing to do with the arts world or whatever, but very good businessman. So I learned a lot from him as far as, if you're setting up your own business, if you're starting to be a composer, don't put all your receipts in a massive shoebox that are that big, because it really doesn't help.
Paul, you did some arranging for some pretty popular bands, right?
Yeah. I mean, literally, as I say, there was a studio in Glasgow called Savah.
Yeah.
And it was this big old Greek church. And basically I had a little room at the back, and then all the big bands would be in the main entrance around there. I'm reliving my youth. And they would come round and bring me a beer and say, hey, come and do this. So it was great because I got to hang with the bands. I got to learn how it works, because obviously I was classically trained. I was doing clarinet concertos and everything else at the Academy, and I got to learn how the bands work. So then I started producing bands, and it kind of worked from there. But it was like, it always sounds like a name drop, but it's not. It's just doing strings for, as I say, like Simple Minds, Belle and Sebastian. I got to work with the Mogwai guys, who I now know really well.
Wow.
And then when Isabel Campbell left Belle and Sebastian, she was like, oh, come and join me, do some stuff with me, because it's the same. Like, you don't know what you're doing, and I always maintain that's when you do your best work. So she started working with Mark Lanigan, and so then we had doing some stuff on that, and she was nominated for the Mercury Music Prize and all these kind of things. And I did about 3 or 4 albums with her.
Wow.
And then the film guys were kind of going like, oh, there's a guy that works with bands and he's also filmy. Let's get him to do some film stuff. So, where I don't know how your career kind of took off, but you just kind of go like
ebbs and flow. Yeah.
Road less traveled.
Yeah, that's an interesting way you've gotten into it. And we're talking about the "Don't You Forget About Me" Simple Minds, right? Is that who you're talking about?
Right, yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's a song. Once it gets in your head, it's there for
they're fantastic. And also, so that was Charlie, who's the guitarist, and then their manager, he got me into, who was it? Fried Young Cannibals.
Yeah.
Fine Young Cannibals. Sorry.
Yeah.
David Steele. So Fine Young Cannibals. She drives me crazy.
Yes.
I can't sing. That's why I work behind the desk. So he went off and did a solo project called Fried.
Yeah.
And so he's another Scottish guy, and then he was down in London, so I'd fly down to London, and it was brilliant because I got to do strings on his album with a Louisiana singer called Jonty, and it was amazing because it was like he knew everything about kind of old 60s style recording. So it's like all the Curtis Mayfield stuff I'd be studying to go, how do we get that sound? And there was a studio in Whitfield Street, which is in Soho, which was the old Sony studio. It's called Whitfield Studios, and they'd shut down. And he was like, I've got to get that sound. I've got to get that sound.
Yeah.
We just went in there one night, basically spoke to the security guard, said, hey, can we just get in there? We had a little kind of recording gear, got in there with about 6 strings, and we just did total guerrilla recording. Well, the place had shut down, and we just kind of got to do it. So we were, I guess, the last recording session ever at Sony, illegally.
Wow. Impressive.
But things like that, it just makes it fun. It's not having a story for story's sake. It's just a case of, instead of, hello, can I have a studio for an hour? It's a case of, right, where's got some soul? Where's got some vibe? If that's where Curtis Mayfield did his stuff, let's go there. If that's where that track was done, let's go there.
Yeah.
So, and even now in film music, we have the same. It's like, where was that film recorded? Oh, that was in Abbey Road, or that was Air, or that was Capitol. Yeah, you go to the studios for the sounds.
Right.
And kind of it's like hallowed ground, isn't it? It's like, this is where E.T. was recorded. This is where this was recorded.
Wow. Yeah, I would be beyond myself. So growing up, are you a cinephile? Are you a big movie guy?
God, yeah, I loved it. But the thing for me, like, it's not like one of those geeks that knew every single film out. But I did always listen to the music, not realizing that you can make a job out of it. You know, it was just I just loved it. And I remember watching The Mission with my gran, and that was the thing that just made me go, yeah. So Morricone and Gabriel Zobo, and it was just, oh my god, this is beautiful. And it's like, is that film music? Because it sounds like classical music.
Right.
Like, oh no, it is film music. Oh wow, it was written specially for that. Oh, you can make a job out of that. So that was the thing that suddenly got me ding.
Yeah, that score is just, it's like heart-wrenching and heartbreaking. Like it's just, and it's uplifting, and it's every emotion on the scale is touched in that score, boy. I tell you, that's a great
Isn't it? You got that and then you got the oh, it's just wonderful.
That's one of my first interviews, like 6 or 7 years ago, was with a guy who did a wonderful score, Chris Spielman, who, for the Lost City of Z. It's one of his. He's done like 2 or 3 things. It's an amazing score. And I said, you guys who do movies are very much like the Beethoven of 2020, whatever it was, 2017, 2018. And he kind of laughed. He said, there's no way we're Beethoven. Like, I wasn't saying like literally you're Beethoven, but I'm saying your music serves that purpose in modern day. I feel that way. I mean, people don't have to agree with me, but he was like just laughing it off. But I meant it. Like, I really feel like composers, you know, from the comment that the person you mentioned you were with said, you know, it is like classical music. It is modern day beauty. There's just listening to these scores that drive these movies, Paul. I don't know. I think it's beautiful what you guys do.
I think I did a score. This isn't a name drop, but with Philip Glass recently. And actually, I've done 3 collaborations with him. And this one, The Pigeon Tunnel, I was chatting away to him, and you know, his whole thing is music is music is music. His dad worked in a record store, and he said, I think he always said, like, well, how do you classify my music? I was like, I don't know, the classical department. He's like, yeah, but it's not, because I had Michael Rosberg doing all of his stuff and taking it touring. He said, I like to sit at synthesizers or this or that.
Yeah,
I just like it when music makes someone feel something. I don't give a shit what kind of music it is. It can be all the electronica. You know, there you go. There's all my keyboards around there and
wow.
But and there is kind of my classical. In fact, hang on, you got the DREDD there. Hang on, where's the? Here you go. Da, da, da. Look at that.
Oh, look at that. Is that a vinyl of the score?
Well, I just sit here like that for the whole thing. There you go.
Oh,
yeah, that is. We did some remixes.
Oh my god!
Mondo, who a wonderful record company who did Tales from the Loop, which was my first collaboration with Philip. So I phoned them up and said, "Look, it's the 10th anniversary of DREDD. This feels like a promo. It's really not. It's sold out." I phoned them up and said, "Look, can we do some remixes of it, just to celebrate the 10th anniversary? Because I love DREDD." And so they said, yeah, we'd love to put it out. So I got Mogwai to do one. I got PT, who I've worked on with Cyberpunk with him and Machine. So I got PT to do one, and a DJ in LA called John Tahana. And I got them to do remixes, and then I did one, and then I also did some piano kind of classical reworkings of it. And I thought that was quite cool, because then people were like, hang on, that's DREDD. Oh, that is DREDD. So it was quite a kind of cool thing. So they did a double vinyl, and I think it sold out in about 5 years or 5 hours or something.
So do you want my address now or after to send it to my house? Like,
dude, I am literally. They did a red vinyl about 5 years ago, I think, for the 5th one. I never bloody got one, and it was only I was working on a film 2 years ago, and she was in a shop in Iceland. This person that was working on the film, and she said, "I've just seen DREDD." I was like, "It doesn't matter how much it is. Buy it for me, bring it back. I'll pay you anything. I don't have it. I want the red vinyl."
Yeah, I mean, I forget how big of a comeback vinyl's making. Like, that's my last. Like, I buy all the composers that I love, I listen to, that I have my podcast. I buy their work. I'm a legit movie fan, but I feel like I have yet to make that leap into vinyl. Like, do you listen to vinyl regularly?
I do listen to vinyl regularly, simply because, in the same way that when you record. There, you're on your computer, so you're composing, going diddle-diddle. But if you record, like for me, I play my own piano, so that's through there in the other room. You need, in the olden days, it would be reel to reel, and you give people a chance to breathe. So the reel gets to the end for people under the age of 900. The reel gets to the end, and then you wait for it to rewind, and then you do another take, press record, then you do the vocals again, or the piano, or whatever. Now it's literally a case of stop, start, stop, start, stop, stop. There's no breathing space between it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's very hard. If you've got the headphones on, you go, hey, what are you? One more. Hey, what are you? harmonize that. Hey, what are you know, kind of thing. You
Yeah.
need to get your head into the space of doing the best take. And
Right.
vinyl for me is like that. It's like you just have a moment of just putting on, you know, you're putting on the needle, and then it's like, wait. Oh, there's the track. There's the anticipation of the music coming on. So
Yeah,
I don't do it the whole time, but there's just definitely something about doing that with a glass of wine. It's quite cool.
there's something very cool about that. You know, you mentioned DREDD. I have to say, before there's one quick thing I wanted to ask you before we hop into DREDD. So I was looking at some of your earlier interviews that you've done. Are you an avid runner?
Am I an avid runner? I love running. My back's quite bad at the moment because I've been sitting here in the studio too much. I got into it when I moved to LA, which was about 8-9 years ago.
Yeah.
And for the first time, I wasn't on a plane. This is a roundabout way of answering your question, because for the first time, I wasn't jet lagged. Like it used to be literally every other week, I was on a plane back to the UK.
Right.
So then my wife and children came over here with me. And then I was like, got all this time when I'm not jet lagged. What am I going to do? So a mate said, you should join the running club down in LA. So I did the LA marathon, and then I did another marathon, marathon. And then I really got into it. I lost loads of weight, felt really fit. But it was that whole getting up at 5:30 in the morning down by the sea in Santa Monica. And now we live in the hills a bit.
Right.
Fucking hot. It's hilly as fuck. So I wouldn't say that I love running anymore. But yes, but I do it a lot. Yeah.
Do you? I guess you kind of answered this, but I was going to say, do you prefer running in the morning or like the afternoon, nighttime? It's clearly got to be the morning because it's
got to be morning because I've got kids who are still sort of at the age where I need to kind of take them off to school and stuff.
Yeah.
But also, once I'm in the studio, that's me till 2 o'clock the next day. So it's like you get on the roll and you don't want anything to interrupt you because you're just on that kind of momentum going.
Right. What's a typical run for you when you were running? What was the mileage? I asked because I love running. I mean, it doesn't look like it, but I run as much as I can.
I can only see your top part. You look like a fantastic runner. Was it typical mileage? During the weeks are short runs, so they're about 3 miles, and then Saturdays, I like, if I can, to go for kind of a 6 or 7 miler. Obviously, if you're training for marathons, then you start building that up to like 10 miles, 12 miles, 14 miles. But normally, kind of typical Saturday would be 6, 7, 8 miles, something like that.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I mean, I do 2 and 3. I'll push 4 on, towards the end of the week. I'll try to work my way up, and if I go more than 4, it's hard. But I try to not run on the main roads anymore because people's faces are buried in their cell phone. So I feel like it's just you take your life in your hands when you run out in the street. So.
But the thing is, you say you take your life in your own hands. You take your life in your own hands if you run the streets of LA, because all the bloody sidewalks have got tree trunks growing through them. So you're going along like that, and you go ahead. The number of phones because it's 5:30 in the morning. It's pitch black. You're running along. And it's like you go head first. The phone goes flying. You're like, oh fuck, that's another one.
So I wanted to go into DREDD because I feel like, and I have some interesting comments to read for you. So I feel like YouTube, people talk about how negative, YouTube can be and how this and that. So I don't read
it. J.K. Rowling once said to me, this is my name drop. I was working on a project with her years and years and years ago. She was finishing the last, sorry to interrupt, but she was finishing the last book of the Harry Potter stuff. So it was a film following her for that year. And the advice she gave was, never ever read comments, because she said it's human nature that if there are 1,000 comments and one is bad, you will focus on the one bad one. Now picture that times 1 billion for her. I can't imagine it. So but anyway, carry on.
But Paul, you did a documentary with her, right? Was it a documentary or
A Year in the Life of J.K. Rowling? Yeah, so she was just finishing up that book. So there's a wonderful filmmaker called James Runcie.
Yeah,
he was the son of the old Archbishop of Canterbury in the UK. So he just followed her around, and so he was there when she wrote literally the last words. So I was one of only 8 people that knew what those last words were.
Wow! So you're talking when the last book was released?
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, she is an interesting person to say the least. I mean, she has done so much.
Yeah, I started listening to a podcast on her actually. You know this one that she's got?
I don't know, but I'm sure it's fantastic.
It's someone that's interviewed her, and it's how Harry Potter has led to America being how it is today, for good and for bad.
Yeah.
And witches, but then sides turning, all that is absolutely fascinating. Anyway, by the by, so carry on. So you're going to tell me about all the awful YouTube comments about?
No, I am not. But like I always, and I do this once in a while with composers, because like DREDD, like I remember seeing the movie, and there are some songs on that score that I still can't get out of my head. I was obsessed. It's still on my running playlist, the DREDD the soundtrack. but there are some. When I left that theater, I was obsessed with this movie. I mean, I'm talking on a loop.
Really?
And I still listen to this day. God's honest truth. Before the end of the interview, I'll show you my running list. It is right at the top. So,
and that's like 0.00005 cents that I got from you then for Spotify. So thank you very much.
Yes. So and the comments were really great because I wanted to see what people like felt about your score. And I have to say, I didn't read a negative comment. I'll be honest with you. One person said this music, talking about DREDD, this music is a big reason of what made DREDD an awesome movie. Straight to the point.
Yeah.
Years later, I still listen to this. The maxed out reverb and sad, almost mournful guitar strums still give me chills, combined with the haunting, slowed vocals. That is awesome. That's pretty cool.
That's weird. That must be Mama's Requiem. Yeah.
And then it talks about how the slow motion scene combined with the music, the colors, is absolutely stunning. I mean, it was comment after comment about this. Just such an underrated movie. Like, those that have seen it are begging for a part 2. When I say those, I mean like thousands of people that have seen it are begging for a part 2.
And the thing is with that, and I know there's always been talk of the TV series as well, and actually I think it would go really well as a TV series.
Really well.
Well, imagine you got the comic books. Like, how many bloody strips are there? So, but I think the thing that I loved, and it actually leaves quite a good feeling with you, is it's been discovered by so many people and so many different generations as an underground sleeper hit kind of thing. You know what I mean? Right. Like, no one went to. I remember going to see it in the theater. There wasn't one poster up for it. It was like, here's the midnight screening of DREDD down Santa Monica. Took along a couple of mates. It was like, excuse me, are you showing DREDD? He's like, yeah, theater 47. Kind of thing. There was no promo for it. I have no idea what it was like in the rest of the world.
But it's confusing. Like, anybody that saw this movie, like a producer or executive, like, how does this not jump out at you as fantastic? And like the music, the color, everything, the actors.
The colors were great. It was the first choice of yellow that I'd ever seen in sci-fi.
Yes.
And then, ironically, been working on Cyberpunk recently, and that's all kind of got the yellow as well. It's just, it's wonderful. And Alex Garland, obviously phenomenal. It was just a really cool thing.
Yeah.
And Carl Urban was bloody brilliant. He nailed it.
Brilliant. I mean, we're not going to get into the fact that DREDD is RoboCop tried to be DREDD, and I thought it was a great movie, but let's face it. I mean, it was written in 1977, and RoboCop took it, but DREDD is DREDD. I mean, this is.
You see the kind of the leather boots coming down, and you see him, and then forget about the kind of. And I wonder if it's the fact that the mask never comes off.
Yes.
Yeah, and I wonder if because of that, people can't empathize with him as a character. I don't know. And is there anything to empathize with anyway? Because he's such a cold character. But I think there is that. Everything's black and white. There's got to be a shade of gray somewhere.
Oh, come on! When he says at the end she's a pass, if you're not into Carl Urban at that point, then like there's no hope for you at all. I mean, come on. There is confusion though, because a lot of people love this movie. Like I said, I'm still thousands. I was on Reddit, Facebook, reading everything I could. So there's an issue with, and just say whatever you can. If you can't, you can't. So, Alex Garland is the director, but Pete Travis is credited for it. But then they came out with
Alex Garland isn't officially the director. Pete Travis is the director, from what I can remember.
Correct. But the final product, from what people say, is much of it is Alex Garland's work. But then they came out with a joint statement that said, we've collaborated. It's a unique collaboration, something to that effect. They said. So I don't know. Whatever you could say about that. I'm not going to.
No, I mean it is all, and this isn't just bullshit. It's like it is all unique collaborations. Every film is different. Some films you work with the director the entire time. Some films the director's for hire, and then you work with the producers the entire time. Sometimes you don't deal with any of them, and it's literally a music editor going, hey, we need a score, come and do it. With this, I got to work with Pete, I got to work with Alex, I got to work with Alon and Andrew, who are the producers. I mean, if you look at DNA, it is Alex and Andrew and Alon coming up with the projects and so on. So for me, I just got to work with them all, and it was a wonderful, unique collaborative experience. But similarly, for me, what a wonderful opportunity to come in and start crafting some weird stuff, because it wasn't a typical Hollywood movie. No. So again, it's like if you're going in and working on those kind of projects where you always work with the director alone and that's it, that's a kind of Hollywood vibe as far as like, well, okay, we're creating the sound now. Suddenly you've got 15 execs coming in the room. DNA are such a close-knit group that it was literally, the three of them crafting it at the end. So it was a very close team working on it.
But I guess my confusion comes: why isn't Alex Garland credited with being a director, right? So have 2 directors listed. I mean, I guess that's a technical thing that I'll never understand.
I'm a lowly composer. Don't ask me.
Well, I got to talk to somebody.
All right, let me text Alex. Hang on, Alex.
All right. So my next question is about the score, right? Because the reason I asked about the directors because I feel like it feeds into this next thing, right? So there were 2 other composers, Jeff and Ben, that had their own score. It was a great score. It was a great score, but in my opinion, it was not right for this movie. Your score fit this movie like a glove. And I don't think people were ready for what you were offering in this score. I feel like when I listen to certain movies or I watch certain movies over the course of history, there are some scores that just fit. Thomas Newman does it a lot. Just different composers. I'm like, that's a perfect.
But even, I was listening to Inception the other day for the first time in forever. And I remember watching Inception, and I know there's a lot of kind of love-hate for Hans, but it's basically because he's so bloody up there. But the Inception soundtrack was, if you were to pick a soundtrack that breaks the mold every time in the same way that The Mission for me, and then you got Thomas Newman with American Beauty. Right. For me, Inception completely broke the mold, and you suddenly got slowed down things. You've got the berms, wonderful, marvelous, but the whole vibe of that soundtrack was so different, and then became imitated. Then you got The Social Network, obviously. So the Social Network, obviously not Hans, but from a point of view of the scores that changed the way that composers then work for the next 10 years. And it's partly because it ends up in temps, and everyone's going, oh, great, it's on the bloody Social Network one. But it's mostly just because the ability to break beyond the mold when people are expecting that, and you go, right. Well, look, I can do that with my eyes shut, but it's not much fun because I've already done that 20 times. Let's try something different. And it's very few projects when the team, they've got a lot of millions of bucks riding on this project. It's hard for them to go, fuck it, let's try something different.
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned that because as soon as Inception comes out, you have 20 movies that try to sound like Inception. When The Dark Knight came out, you had 20 movies trying to sound like The Dark Knight. And I'm going to tell you, when DREDD came out, you had 20 movies trying to sound like DREDD. I'm telling you, it's a fact. It's amazing how that works, Paul, where people... But anyways, I guess my question is...
but isn't that quite a nice thing? It makes you feel quite good. A lot of people go like, aren't you pissed off? You're going to take it to court. It's like, it's quite nice. I'm sure I've done it myself, subliminally or intentionally, whatever kind of thing. It's just nice when people kind of go, it's got a really cool sound, that's cool.
Yeah, I guess somebody that does imitate is a flattering thing. And I have to say, you bring up a good point. Sometimes people do it unintentionally. I feel like comedians do it a lot. They say a joke, they say that's a really clever joke, but it turns out they heard it from a club, from a stand-up comedian.
There was that thing. It was a couple of years ago, wasn't it? And it's and again, I don't know whether they do it. I'm talking about comedians. I don't know whether they do it intentionally. I mean, it's got to be so hard to not do it. There's only so many jokes in the world, presumably. There's only so many notes in the world, presumably. There's only so many sounds in the world, presumably. It's trying to do something different. It's bloody hard.
Right. And you have to be a fool to think that if you're doing it intentionally, that people are going to catch on. If it's an accident, which I do believe it happens, it is what it is. But do you have any type of rapport, or do you talk to Jeff and Ben at any time when that movie was being made? Any type of...
I have never ever spoken to them. I truly hope that they like the DREDD soundtrack. I don't know. I love their stuff, but they're bloody brilliant. And what I love about them is and they've gone on and done so much with Alex as well.
Yeah, sure.
And I think what you said, I don't know, but I think what you said is it probably nailed it on the head. You say, it's not right for the film. I don't know, but I love the fact that they went and did it like a live gig afterwards.
They did. They kind of released it to a different
I think they did it live with two kind of keys as well.
Yeah.
That was it, at a record store. And it was just fucking wicked. I mean, Jeff's bloody amazing. And then you got Ben as well, who's got the more kind of, in my head, orchestral sensitivities. I don't know. But 2 of them together, I believe they met playing soccer or something like that. I don't know. But the point is, whether it was right for it or not, I could totally picture, I listened to it afterwards, years later. I could totally picture kind of looking at Mega City 1 and the strips and stuff, listening to that. It's kind of, it's cool. For me, that's not the sound of the film. But what I would say, and what was completely their idea, because it was Alex's idea, was Alex said to me, oh, look, Ben and Jeff had done this thing, the slow-mo thing, while I was on set. I was listening to Slow Down Justin Bieber. And it was just an idea that they had while I was doing it. And I don't know if it's any use to you or not.
Genius. Yeah.
And you know, it's kind of random stuff, isn't it? You go down the rabbit hole on YouTube, and it's like, what the fuck? And so someone, no, there was Justin Bieber on the DREDD soundtrack. No, there bloody wasn't.
Yeah.
But what there was the idea of suddenly, oh, you could slow down the music. I think it's a great idea. So that was completely Jeff and Ben's vibe as far as like slowing down the track for the slow-mo stuff. And it totally helped me as far as sort of going like, oh, that's great. And then there was this software called Pull Stretch. And then you got to start writing music which works with Pull Stretch because it doesn't work with slowed down. If you slow down a piano 8,000%, it sounds like shit. Yeah. So then we recorded some vocals and we kind of slowed down the vocals by 8,000%. It's like, oh, that's really interesting. So yeah, so again, but not every film you get a chance to do that. So it was a wonderful experience.
And to wrap up that last thought, I will say that I listened to part of I think it shows the movie or whatever it is called. It's called DREDD, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. And,
it wasn't a movie. It was just I think they put out the album. Yeah.
Yeah, but when you watch the videos, it's kind of like it's DREDD.
It's done.
It's DREDD-esque. So, but I got to say, the sound is very much like Ennio Morricone. It's right out of Midnight Express, and I feel
cool.
While I loved it. It definitely would have made DREDD a different movie. But anyways, I'm going to hop off of that. But I feel like
I'm just getting rid of that screen because that's doing my head in. Sorry.
so I have to say these songs in particular, I told you I could listen to on a loop. Which one of these are you partial to, if any? Right. So those listening, I know that are DREDD fans. Mama's Requiem, She's a Pass, Mega City 1, The Rise of Mama, Lockdown, Order in the Chaos, Judge, Jury, and Executioner. So if all I ever had left were those songs to listen to, that would be an excellent running playlist.
Like, how can you run to Mama's Requiem? You're going like...
But you know what? I feel... I'm not... No, I'm telling you. I like the change of pace. I can't just be like... I can't like listen like disco, like a very... Like Run Lola Run is a great soundtrack. Yeah. I can't listen to that start to finish. I'll get a heart attack. I like that kind of like, let's slow this down a little bit, and then boom, let's go off. So I don't know. I love them all. Anything you want to say about any of those wonderful pieces?
First off, I can't listen to music when I run because I focus on the duration of the track. And if I know, it was when I was doing marathon training, it's like, if you know that a track lasts 3 minutes, right? 3.5 minutes if you're lucky. Right. And you know that Saturday run leading up to the marathon, which is a 16, 18, 20 miler training, you're going, oh my God, how many bloody songs have I still got to listen to? And you're locking blocks. That's the way that my brain works. So I listen to podcasts instead. If I was running, I'd probably do Mega City 1. Like, and I know there's the whole vibe as well, because lots of people say to me that it gets them in the kind of vibe. But the Mega City 1, there's something. There's something about that driving bass, the fuzz, which kind of gets me. But again, the funny thing about DREDD, God, this is all DREDD. But the funny thing about DREDD is gamers, the coders that make the games, the number of times they get in touch with me and just say, love listening to this while I code. And I was always a bit confused because for me, DREDD was a really bloody weird score. Yeah, it's got those few tracks. But even like the longest one, like Mega City 1, it only goes on for about a minute before it starts heading into the kind of van getting fuzzed or whatever else kind of thing.
Right.
So you never really get to let loose in it. You know, and She's a Pass is one that we did because specifically for the credits at the end and stuff. But in general, there's no long tracks you can get into. So I said to them, why do you listen to this when you code? I mean, again, yay, thanks. I love the fact that if anybody listens to my music out with films, it means for me that it's done something to them that's hit them emotionally.
Right.
And they're always just like, it's interesting because it doesn't have that many melodies. So when we code, it's like nice listening to kind of weirdness.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting. So it doesn't make us feel, oh, I'm feeling sentimental while I'm coding a battle, or it doesn't make me feel that. It's just a cool score, which isn't getting into my head and making me feel something like that.
Was feedback, and we're going to talk about a few of your other works, but like, it was feedback immediate when this movie popped? Did you feel like people were all over the score, like bam, right away?
It's funny. It was used in about 20 trailers in the space of 6 months. So I don't own the rights to it, so I didn't really get much money for it. But 20 different companies kind of wanted to use kind of all those tracks, and it was quite cool, you know. It's like, again, I think it was something about it that just got the zeitgeist, so that's kind of cool. But I didn't really realize it got that kind of cool feedback from, I would say, for about a year or two when people started going. I was working on a game, Battlefield Hardline, and I was speaking to the coders on that, and then I was suddenly working on a game called Warhammer Dawn of War, and I went up to the studios in Relic in Vancouver, and one comes up and says, "Excuse me, Mr. Leonard-Morgan." I was like, "Well, Paul," but anyway, yeah, fine. And it was very weird, and it was like that whole kind of, "Can I just say, big fan of your work?" And I, again, I'm me, for better or for worse. So it always feels weird when someone comes up and says, "Oh, can I just say, I love your work?" And it's like, "Oh, that's great. Do you want to sit and have a pint?" And I'm just like, yeah. Go on, you sit down and talk about it. And for me, it's like at the end of a gig, I'd much rather talk to fans or talk to people about what it is that you do and what they like and their reaction to it. Much rather that than you feel kind of aloof from other people going, "Oh, that's great, thanks, I'm off here." I'm much rather talk to the people who dig your stuff so you can talk about it.
Well, I think you're in a position where it's hard to see, right? Because like as somebody who's a fan, like I adore this score, and I did I saw this movie at the theater opening weekend. I could say that for a fact. And I feel like as a fan, the way movies and music hit, it's like, wow, this guy's created something special. So yeah, I get that you're a totally humble guy, and you're I'm sure.
I mean, my ego's out here. Don't worry.
But like, I just from like, there was a comment thread on Reddit, like they were just going on about how wonderful, and I get it. I get it. But you have done other things, right? So Limitless was
yes. I mean, that was 10 years ago, whatever it was. You have done other things, Paul.
No, but like I feel bad that I harped on it for a while, but Jesus Christ, like it's such a masterpiece. Limitless, wonderful soundtrack. Do you feel that was it Limitless would you say it's your first big break? Would you say that?
Yeah, Limitless was 6 months before I started work on DREDD. So Limitless came out, went to #1. That was absolutely my big break. Neil Berger, who I've actually just finished a feature film with
nice,
a couple of months ago, so his new one. So what I love is when you work with directors over and over again, or they come back to you and say, "Hey, I love that experience, let's do this," or whatever, but let's not do this as far as what you did. So great, let's do this. And it's nice because that was my whole thing of like, look, I produce bands, but I do a lot of electronica, but I work with big fuck off orchestras. And the whole Limitless thing was, who is this Paul guy?
Yes.
I swear he exists. And everyone over here is like, well, I know he's got his BAFTAs or his Ivor Novello nominations or whatever, but we haven't really, that doesn't translate to America. So it's like, all right, well, look, he's working with these bands. And I've been working with No Doubt, this producer Spike. So I had all my keyboards set up from the sounds for one of their albums. So I was like, oh, look, I think this would suit the Limitless thing perfectly. Bradley Cooper, Robert De Niro and stuff. So got the gig, went really well. So then suddenly I've done this big film and went to #1 and stuff. So then DREDD were looking for a composer, and they kind of got in touch and said, "Hey, are you interested?" It's like, great. So I did DREDD, and then I did Walking with Dinosaurs. So it's a kind of big orchestra thing. So yeah, Limitless was definitely kind of #1. But I think for me, where you're always trying to find yourself sonically, right. And I think where people struggle with me a bit is I don't like being pigeonholed. Like I like working with orchestras, but I like working with electronica.
Right.
I've got a short attention span, as you can see. So it was only about, I would say, 4 or 5 years ago, I was working with Errol Morris. He's this wonderful filmmaker, Oscar winner for The Thin Blue Line. Brilliant documentarian.
Yeah.
And I started working with him, and he had worked with Philip Glass for the last 3 soundtracks, and then I'd used Danny Elfman for 1. And then I was suddenly just like, well, what the fuck am I doing? I'm sure I would love to kind of try this out. And now I've done like 6 films with him, and it gave me, and he gave me, and Stephen, his editor, gave me this inner confidence. They were just like, look, stop trying to be whatever. We love you for your music. They'd heard a theatre thing that I'd done, the James plays. They said, we love your work. We've temped it up. All works great. Go do your thing. Yeah. And Errol is a very kind of in-your-face character, so it's kind of quite intimidating when someone's intellect is like that. You're like, and he's been private detective, so you kind of go, okay, I must not say anything that's going to incriminate me. And yeah, so it was like when I got onto about my 2nd or 3rd soundtrack, I did Wormwood with him, B-side, American Dharma. But it was around the kind of Wormwood side, but I was suddenly just like, God, they like me for me, not just as a person, but as a soundtrack kind of thing. Just like, right, go do your thing. And so I was like, can we try some electric cello over this? And in my head, it was like, well, he's only ever used Philip, And I understand now he hasn't only ever used Philip, but in my head, he'd only ever used Philip glass. So I thought it should be classical. But I was like, this would really suit. There's a guy on drugs here. Let's get an electric cello in. And suddenly we had like a baritone vocal coming in that I was fucking around with distortion. We had electric cello that we're recording elsewhere. We had this quartet. We took out Capitol Studios. It was a brilliant experience. And I think when you suddenly relax and think of people as collaborators rather than employers,
right,
then it's the way forward, because then you're just like, you're not worried. It's just a case of, hey, I've got this fucking great idea. And if it doesn't work, let's try something else. But you've got to think of them as collaborators instead of like the enemy. It's like, no, they're on your side. They want it just to be great. So go off, try it. And if it goes too far weirdness, then you can pull it back in. But you're never going to know until you try those things.
You know, you mentioned before, you know, the ebbs and flow, up and down, up and down. That's kind of how things can go, right? But like Limitless, you're like up here, and then, you know, DREDD up. So you're up in rarefied air. I mean, I would think there's pressure to a degree, Paul, where it's like, man,
yes.
I mean, is anything after?
Yes, there is. And I think for me, what it was the fact that these were all electronic soundtracks. But again, you need to bear in mind, I was classically trained. So I was classically trained, start producing bands, but I missed my orchestra stuff. I was like, well, this is all fine and well. They're just like, but the zeitgeist is your DREDD soundtrack. So we just want it to be electronic. I was like, yeah, but Limitless. I mean, we had a 30-piece orchestra in Limitless. You wouldn't know because I put it through fuzz boxes and distortion pedals and stuff like that. But we had 10 double basses. Bradley Cooper, imagine, and the camera pans off him and goes down a skyscraper. And I said to Relativity, the film company, I was just like, I need 10 double basses, recorded at air, just to go like that as he comes down. And they were like, where did our money go? I was like, that sound just there. But I could not have achieved that if I didn't have the players. So it's like, you can't achieve that if you don't have the toys to begin with.
Right.
So in answer to that question, it's like, yes, there was the DREDD and there was the Limitless thing that were up there. But I really wanted to start doing some orchestral stuff. And suddenly I got to work on some Minions, the short films for the Minions.
Nice, yeah.
And I was like, this is such good fun. And I just had a kid that wasn't well. And then she was alive. And I was like, life's fantastic. And I suddenly became like the animation guy. Right. So it suddenly went really different from doing all of these to suddenly just like, oh, wow, he writes really cool melodies that are orchestral. But then it was all orchestral for about 3 years. So then, let's say, Battlefield Hardline came along, and I was like, brilliant. I'm now back to the kind of electronica. So now I'm in a happy place where I get to work with both. But it takes a while to make people trust you enough that you don't just get known for just electronica or just orchestral.
What
to kind of blend the two.
Yeah, absolutely. What can you say about the movie you just finished with Neil? Anything?
Yeah, there is not one melody in it. actually, that is not true. So the conversation I had on Limitless with Neil was about, I remember going out for a drink with him afterwards, and I said, there was a scene where you got Bradley Cooper and you've got Abby Cornish, and they're in a cafe. I'm just remembering this. You've got Bradley Cooper, Abby Cornish in a cafe, and they're basically splitting up, but not quite. And it was quite sad. And that was the only time we used strings in a melodic way, but it was really just long notes. And I said to him, that was tough because you're trying to portray an emotion, but it wasn't an emotional scene. It suddenly becomes too sickly sentimental, and I hate that. Really cheesy. Right. And he said, yeah, that's because I didn't want people to feel for them. Yeah, Bradley Cooper was he was high on drugs. He was quite aloof. You didn't want people to feel emotional. So on this film with Neil, just earlier on this year, and we had the same thing. It's like, look, I don't want this to be a traditional Hollywood score. I want it to be really raw. I want it to be really bold. I can't really say anything about the film at all, but what I want as far as the score goes is for it to sound like nothing you've ever heard before. Right. How the hell to do that? You know, so it's like, well, okay, well, I will, but you still need people to have an emotional attachment to some of the characters. Otherwise, she's going to feel really cold, or he's going to feel really cold, whatever. So you've got to be able to kind of find something, whether it's in a sound, so in a sound of one of the keyboards or the stuff that you're morphing around with, or in the sound of percussion or the sound of something. I maintain that soundscape can sound beautiful or soundscape can sound disgusting. It can sound like a cacophony, which is going to drive the audience away, or going back to DREDD, there's something in there which people react to. Even if it's a cold sound, it can still sound warm. Does that make sense? Like,
it makes perfect sense.
Sound cold.
Yes.
It can, but it can also sound, it's like distortion. It can sound beautiful.
I wanted to run. That's really well said. I want to run something by you. So you talk about taking chances and a lot of this being creative and not being pigeonholed into one area. So I was watching a movie called Gran Turismo. And are you? Yeah. Are you familiar with? Obviously, you know who Moby is. So do you remember the end of Heat, where Moby's song? Was it the end of the God floating out? I forget what it's called, but it's an iconic piece. Like it.
Yes.
It really drives home one of the best movies ever made. So I'm watching Gran Turismo, and this is not a spoiler. And the end comes rolling around, and son of a bitch, they used that song.
Did they?
And I was like, if I hadn't seen the movie, I'm like, somebody said they used this song, I'm like, oh boy, like this movie better hit. And
hang on, Michael Mann didn't do Gran Turismo, did he?
No, it was he does a lot of sci-fi. Oh God, Neil Blomkamp.
Oh, who did District? Blah 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 blah.
Yes. Yeah. So like when the song hit, it hit me hard. Like tears came. Like they used it perfectly. But I guess
what I'm really suited. It wasn't just a case of that reminds me of Blur.
Right. Sometimes I feel like people put in a song like by the Rolling Stones because it's the Rolling Stones, right? But the song fit the narrative of what was going on. Like it's a very kind of redemptive song. Like it's got like this like redemption to it, and it's so powerful. But anyways, I felt that was a big risk.
Well, it's like at the end of the Bourne films, isn't it?
Yes.
And you know that it's coming, and it's like, oh my God, there's that sound. It's like Pavlov's bell. It's like, oh my God, that's the sound. It's coming. That's the end of the film. Right, I'm now waiting for the next Bourne film to come out.
Yeah, so I just felt like that was a risk to use an iconic song like that. That was one of the, I mean, I don't know if that's something you've ever done or thought about, but you've done some really creative things. So I don't know if go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say normally it's music supervisors that come up with those songs. So as a composer, we're working on the soundtrack. But I think I finished a series recently called Fellow Travelers, and I think what's from that, Michael in Canada, the wonderful music supervisor, and Ron Neisboner. Ron wrote Philadelphia, and Ron, the showrunner on this. And writers a lot of the time will write into the script. This is me writing. Writers will write into the script this song. Music supervisor's job is to go, you can't afford ABBA, you can't afford this, but we can get this song. And if we give you your kind of 5 Dream Team ones, then we'll swap those out for something a bit cheaper or this and stuff. And at the end, when you have a good music supervisor, it feels like you haven't made any compromises. It's wonderful. But Ron Neisboner, what he wanted at the end of every single episode of Fellow Travelers, without giving any stories or anything like that, it's a big LGBTQ series.
Yep.
And they have the song at the end of every episode is written by a Canadian artist that died of AIDS. And it was something that Ron really is passionate rights activist. And it's something that he really wanted to do. And you think, oh my God, when it suddenly sets you off, and then me and Michael, or mostly Michael, but Michael coming up with kind of all these songs, kind of going, well, actually, there weren't that many artists that died of AIDS from Canada, but then there are also US people as well. But it suddenly adds a whole dimension to it when you have people that care that much about songs, about music. It becomes this team, and you realize then that every single note that you write is going to get analyzed or not analyzed because someone cares that intrinsically about what is being used in the series or the film, whatever. So I think that's the difference for me between a really creative, arty film or series and one where music's just lumped on, where that really is that mindset behind every single song. I think it's really cool.
Paul, and that's a great point. And I feel like, I don't know, from an outsider looking in, I would feel like I needed, if I was the music supervisor, I would feel like I needed my composer's opinion on this. Like, I feel like it's not something I would say, listen, this is what we need. Maybe I'm being
you're too insecure to be a music supervisor. No, but I mean, we do need to know what songs there are half the time, because if we're writing, if you've got a score coming off the back of it,
right?
It's not so much about the vibe of the score, because I know what I'm doing in my part of the filmmaking process, but sonically it's got to be in the same key or related key, otherwise it's going to sound all clashy as hell.
Yeah, it's called God Moving Over the Face of Waters. I could not let that go. I don't want to.
Okay.
But let's talk about Fellow Travelers, because I have not hopped on into this yet. It is in my queue for the next few days. What can you say about Fellow Travelers? And I know you did episode 1. Are you doing all the episodes? Or?
I've done all of Fellow Travelers. Yeah, we did. So it's 8 episodes, and I can safely say that it is one of the most incredible series that has ever been made. And I like literally, I watch every single frame of that. I think there's probably, I don't know, 1 in every 10,000 frames there's something wrong with it. I mean, it's just wonderful. So the cinematography is wonderful, the scripts are wonderful. I mean, it's very explicit gay sex on it.
Yes.
And I think also though, that is a wonderful thing, because it's not just breaking boundaries for the sake of it. Everyone that's certainly seen it so far, the feedback has been, oh my God, I wasn't expecting that, and I wasn't expecting that. It's like, well, that's great. So there's a lot of gay sex in it, fine. But it's a love story, and it is a wonderful love story. And I couldn't give a shit with the person's straight, gay, whatever. I'm just watching that going, it's just beautiful. It moves you to tears half the time. But the cool thing about the music is, when I was chatting away to Ron about it, when at the start of this year, I was like, look, let's come up. It's got a motif that keeps coming back and back and back and back. And there was a cello who was one of the characters, Tim. Hawk is this other character who's very much the dominant person, who has got this driving piano and a quartet behind it. And then there's a bass flute, not me playing, and a harp. And that's it. But the sound that we did, we recorded it at United Recording Studios. Capitol Studios is shut down. And they had these things in the 60s, chambers, which I don't know if you know about or not, but basically big reverbs. And it's how you used to record. So a reverb is, if you go, hello. So it's not an echo going, hello, hello, hello. It's hello. And it sounds like you're in a massive cathedral.
Gotcha.
So that's what a reverb is.
So
in the olden days, to make those, they made different size rooms underneath studios or inside studios. And so you stick a microphone up, say in the room through there, and we're recording here, say there's strings here. You pipe the strings through a speaker into that room through there. And then you've got a microphone there, which is recording the reverb, because they're all different sounds. It's like sticking it up in a church. And then it comes back in here. And so you've recorded the reverb. So now you can do it on a computer. But the sounds of those studios were like the Pet Shop Boys, where the Beach Boys did Pet Sounds, all those kind of things. It's this wonderful sound. So I said, it's got to be that studio, because it's one of the few that still have these chambers.
Right.
So there is something about a quartet with chambers which creates this just beautiful, very close-up emotional sound. I've never booked up a soundtrack like this where you got to have the same players, because that quartet were intrinsic to the sound, and the studio and the mixer, all of this stuff together. We're booking it up like 2 months in advance, 3 months in advance. And then suddenly they said, oh, we're shutting down United. It's like, what the fuck? You can't shut down United. We've done the whole soundtrack here. We've got 1 episode left to do. And they said, well, we made so much money from filming the Super Bowl ad here that we think we're just going to shut it down and just do lots of filming here. And I was like, look, I'm very happy for you that you're making a fortune, but I need my soundtrack. So they were brilliant, and they kept it open for 1 extra week so that we could go and have the final ever recording session.
That's cool. That's cool.
Because otherwise I would have had, and I don't know whether people know that or not when they hear it, but for me, I like to think that a thing is a sum of its parts. So you couldn't have 6 episodes done in one studio and then doing your last 2 somewhere else. Because again, emotionally, you're on a journey. Right. And the last cue, this soundtrack is really up there. You've got 3-minute cues, 4-minute cues, sometimes without any dialogue, whether it's a sex scene or a romance scene, or there's espionage and there's all this kind of stuff. The music is frigging up. I mean, it's loud. If you don't, it's not about me going, it should be loud. There's nothing else happening in some of these scenes. It's just driving. It doesn't need to have any dialogue in some of those bits. So it's wonderful when you put your heart and soul into it, because you know that it's not wall to wall, but when it's there, it's not just being buried like wallpaper that you have in a lot of films where it's just beginning to end solid music. Instead, it being down there in the mix, but all the way through, it's like space, 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 music, space, 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 music.
Yes. I've had other composers on, and when I've asked them, I'm sure you've been asked this 1,000 times, TV versus movies. Most have said TV is, I don't want to say a nightmare, but it's a hell of a lot more work. That's what they said, not my words, because of the amount you have to create. So like in your case, it's 8 episodes. Let's just say they're an hour a piece. I mean, I know you're not doing music from start, but that's a lot of work. I mean, then some of these shows are 16 episodes, some are 24. Like, that's a lot of music to create.
It is a lot of music. And I remember I did Limitless, the TV show, and that was literally, actually, and I did a series called Spooks in the UK, and I remember that was like my training ground, because that was a BBC 55 minutes, which is 55 minutes, and it felt like there was about 2 hours of music in it. I mean, it was literally wall to wall, and I would write it every week, and they were going like, why didn't you just use some of the cues in the previous episodes? Because that's cheating. I want to do it like every single time.
Yeah.
And now I've learned a bit. It's not, you're not reusing music, but you're reusing themes. So suddenly it's like, well, that's his theme and that's their theme and so on. So it's a lot of music. But what I would say the difference between film and TV, again, I keep going back to DREDD just because I'm looking at the DREDD logo here.
Yeah.
But it's, in DREDD, you got stop. And it's echoing around peach trees. But it's literally a hi-hat and that's it. Because it's sound design. That doesn't come across on TV. So on TV, you can't be as creative sonically with those kind of things because there are only certain frequencies that come through on most people's TV sets. So then it's a case of, okay, well, it's then going to be melodies. For me, I hate people that just go, here's pad 101 and just keep their finger on it. I'm sure there's a time and a place for it, but I'm not that kind of composer. It doesn't do it for me. I like having melodies or substance or weird shit going on. So it's definitely harder because you've got less harmonics to play with instead of having the big spectrum that you've got in film because it's coming up in Dolby Atmos or whatever. TV, it's kind of squashed, so you've only got that room to work with. So your sub bass doesn't work, your big highs don't work, and you've got to make things work through there at the same time as the dialogue's there as well.
Right. Paul, this will be the last thing I say. Thank you for all this time. You are super talented. There's one thing that drives me nuts in shows, right? When cinematographers and sometimes composers do this too, like you'll be watching a great show and to fill time, they'll show the same skyline shot or the same shot of the traffic or the same shot of backing away. It's like, oh, that drives me bananas.
Outside just so we know we're in New York.
Yes, like, oh my God, it's like every episode it feels like 5 minutes, and like music can be the same way too. So I love the fact that like your attention to detail, like it does pop off the screen, like you can hear it. So that's really cool. That's really cool. So it sounds like your hands are full with projects and whatever you wanted to get off, Paul, and talk about before I let you go. Projects, social media. I have your website here. Whatever you wanted to say.
Well, you can find me on Instagram. I'm shit at all social media because what I do is like you have all these people that have beautifully curated stuff. I'm awful because I spend my time in the studio or studios or traveling. So I spend my entire time just doing crap little videos, which apparently people find funny. So you can find me on Instagram, which I think is Paul-Leonard-Morgan as well, or Twitter, X, Threads, whatever. Basically, I do it while I'm loading up cues. So you kind of go load. I've got 3 minutes while the kind of cue's loading up for the next one. So I kind of go on and do a quick video or do a quick this. So, but yeah, genuinely sort of come on because I love chatting away to fans and they do become randomly like friends in the sense that even if you never meet them. Like I remember in Tales from the Loop, there was someone, it became this big thing. We had over 1,000 people do covers of the main themes. And there was someone, I was telling someone the other day, there was someone in Milan, which was the first lockdown in Italy. And they got in touch and said, your soundtrack has helped me through this. My gran died, my mum died, and I listened to your music on loop. And I was like, it's devastating and heartbreaking. But the fact that music, again, that much of an effect on someone, that's what I love. So the fact that whether it's film music or concert music, which I do as well, whatever it is, the fact that it has an emotion outside of what the original intention was, we're bloody lucky to do it, aren't we?
But see, that's what I was trying to tell you earlier. Like your music has a profound effect. Like you never know where that ripple, hits. You don't know who it hits. But I lied to you. I have one quick question. So by nature, being a composer it can be a lonely job. A lot of hours in your studios.
And that's why we talk so much. Please don't leave. It's 5 hours.
So by nature, it's a very lonely job. But you're also a family guy. That's a I don't want to say odd balance, but it certainly contrasts each other big time, right? The way being isolated versus being this guy that's picking his kid up at school or wherever. Talk about that, the nature of fatherhood and the nature of being a composer.
Being a dad is the best thing. I've got 2 girls, and them and my wife, they are just bloody everything to me, right?
Yeah.
And then you come in here, and then it's like, yeah, but writing film music's everything to me, or writing this concerto is everything to me.
Yeah.
And then like I used to worry because we built the studio back here, so I've got the house over there, and then you kind of walk past through the garden, and then I've got 1,500 square foot studio here, so we can record up to like 25 strings, right?
Wow.
Big piano, assistant through there, it's all great. But I used to worry that the kids would come back and I'd be like, oh no, bugger off, I've got too much on. Instead, they come in for 5 minutes and go, hey, how's your day, Dad? It's like, oh, good. All right, cool. And then they go, it's like, hang on, look, I've got got all this stuff here. It's really interesting. And they're just like, yeah, fine. I've got my mates. So I love it. I love the fact that, you get up in the morning, you've got an hour and a half with them, whatever. You go for your run, get them ready for school. My wife does a lot as well. Take them off. She's utterly brilliant. I couldn't do anything without her because she gets them in the middle of the day while I'm on a roll. Yeah. Then I'll go back and have dinner with them, go and play, some sports, take my daughter to karate, whatever kind of thing. And then I'm back in here in the evening after kind of thing. So definitely having the studio close to the house has been brilliant. But I mean, it's a totally valid point because being a composer is inherently a selfish job. It drives everybody insane when I'm just humming the entire time. I don't realize I'm humming because it's just what's in there because I've just been, there's something there. And I'm awful at the start of projects because I get really frustrated. I'm thinking, shit, am I ever going to come up with anything again? No, I'm the worst. I'm the worst. And then you come up with a tune that's like, yes, I'm the best. So, your emotions go like that. But the great thing about fatherhood is it's totally grounding. And so many composer buddies get in touch and kind of say like, how the fuck do you do it? I'm thinking of having kids, but I'm not sure. And I definitely used to worry about it before we had kids. I'm just like, I do insane hours. It's like 20-hour days. So it's like I don't know how I'm going to fit in something else. Yeah, soundtracks are brutal, but you find your way around it. You just do it. It's life, isn't it? You just find your way through. But I adore it, and I'm definitely one of those dads that gets to see more of their kids than some others. Simply, I think because of this setup. So it means that when they get back from school, they're doing their homework at school, and then I go out, as I say, drive the kids to karate, all the kind of different things. Read a book with them, and for me it's also a nice 2 hours kind of over dinner time and before bedtime where it takes my brain away from it all, so it's not quite all consuming. But then when you come back in here at like 8:30 and you get back on with it, then it's ticking away till 2, and then you go to bed at 2 and your brain's kind of going tick 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 tick, so you maybe get to sleep at 3 and then you're back up at 5:30 again. So yeah.
I don't know how you do it, Paul. I don't know how you do it, but thank you.
That's why I look like this.
Thank you for this. I really appreciate it. I'm such a huge fan, and for you to give me this time is greatly valued. Thank you for that, Paul.
Oh, Darren, thanks so much for having me, man. Absolutely blast.
Take care of yourself.